Welcome, my friends, to the Generations Radio broadcast. My name is Kevin Swanson. It's so good to have you tuned in to us today as we continue to chronicle the demise of Western civilization, the breakdown of faith, family, and freedom in the Western world. And friends, interesting times. We're not discouraged one little bit. God is working right now, and there are some amazing things happening around us, especially with the economy. And it's interesting. It's not just me commenting on what's going on with the economy in a negative sense. I can't find an optimistic news source anywhere still. This is 2013, 5 years after the Great Recession of 2008. I still can't find a consistently optimistic news source on this. It seems like everybody agrees on one thing: conservatives, libertarians, liberals alike. The economy is DOA. Depression is inevitable. In fact, here's a Time magazine article I just came upon, came out last week. Why the economy could pop. Surveys show deep pessimism over the nation's economic outlook. Such sentiment made sense after the scary financial collapse of 2008. Friends, again, they give all these negative signals in this article. This is about a 4-page article from Time magazine. A smaller share of personal income is being used to pay off debts than ever before. Personal consumption spending is higher than ever before. 2.4 million fewer citizens working now than 2008. The unemployment rate is high for high school graduates. Underemployment is at 80%, friends. Twice what it was in 2001. Ergo, no recovery. No recovery. Since the 2001 recession. And after the 2008 recession, we're dealing with college unemployment at 50% underemployment rates for college graduates from 2008, 2009, 2010. And here's the clicker. I think this one's important. Median income in America is down 8% since 2007. That was 6 years ago. Median household income has not improved. It is down 8% since 2007. That's the first significant drop since the Great Depression. The good times are over. I think that's what everybody says. Everybody sort of knows it. The good times are over. The good times are over. China is slowing down. Europe is in recession. This is the Time magazine article. This is supposed to be positive. This is the magazine that endorsed Barack Obama, is excited about his recovery plan over the last 5 years after the 2008 recession. This is a no-brainer, though. This recession is not going to work its way out. You're not going to find the economic situation of this country improving much if the character of the nation has been in free fall for the last generation or two. Hey, you've got a society where 42% of kids are born outside of wedlock, up from 6% in 1960. You're not going to see the economic picture improve very much as 70% of young men don't have jobs. They're not getting married by 30 years of age, up from 30% in 1970. Friends, This is where we are right now with the breakdown of our present economy. But where is this going to take us? As I say many times on this program, the life raft manufacturing centers are booming on the deck of the Titanic, and we couldn't be happier. We couldn't be more optimistic, but it doesn't look very good for the Titanic itself. Now, joining me to talk about the future and where we are right now is Dennis Peacocke. He's got a new book out that is critical, I think, to the discussion on this, On the Destiny of Nations, Resolving Our Economic Crisis. And Dennis has been with us before on this program. He joins us again after a couple of years. It's good to have you back, Dennis. Thanks for joining us again on Generations.
My pleasure. I'm glad to be with you, Kevin, and you certainly gave a rousing introduction of the topic at hand.
Dennis, you had the 2001 recession. You had the 2008 recession. Everybody's saying we haven't recovered from the 2001 recession, let alone the 2008 recession. What's going on here? Is God sending some harbingers for something worse? It seems to me a lot of people are sensing something like this.
Well, let me, Kevin, address the more foundational issues surrounding this from certainly my point of view, and I have a background having worked as an economist back when. The real crisis is the values crisis here in Western culture.
Yeah.
Our values were largely, not totally, but largely determined out of the Judeo-Christian heritage. Mm-hmm. And we hit the 60s. Good old Dr. Spock had convinced the parents of my generation that discipline was not really the way to produce what we needed to produce as psychologically healthy people. So we went through the 60s and a great turnover of, the status quo, so-called. Mm-hmm. And really what economics as a discipline simply reflects the value base of the culture that is driving the economy.
You cannot separate economics from socio in the socioeconomic picture.
Yeah, you cannot. Economics is a derivative. It's a result of the value systems of the culture in which so-called economics is functioning.
But Dennis,
economics is like a pipe. It reflects what you pour through the pipe, and what we're pouring through the pipe is what's created this crisis.
But Dennis, we've got an experiment going on. We have half of marriages ending in divorce, and 50% of kids born out of wedlock, up from just a couple percentage points 40 years ago. It's an experiment. We're going to go with this for a while, but it's not going to produce much when it comes to the economy, is it?
Well, the experiment is an abject failure.
Yeah.
And, if you look at results on any standard or scale, the results of the experiment are dismal. They are getting worse. And, of course, you have the system, the current power system that is controlling government, we could call it the matrix, which is doing everything that it possibly can to whistle by the graveyard. It is wanting us to look at the stock market and some of the what I call tactical or short-term indicators of the economy, so that you will not look at the fundamentals and the core issues of the economy, not the least of which is the debt.
Yes.
Now, the debt, I was at a meeting on the very highest levels in this country earlier this spring, where a number of the world's senior economists and the U.S. economists were all meeting. And there wasn't a single one of them that did not say what I'm now about to say. We've never been here, and we really don't know what to do.
Wow.
Now, that is coming from the elite, the heads of the Ivy League schools, the senior economists in the country. And
the Titanic is moving towards the iceberg at 247 knots. We're 27 meters away, and we don't really know what to do.
That is basically it. Now, fortunately, as you said, I loved your analogy of the manufacturing of lifeboats on the ship.
Yeah.
And that is our hope. And again, I hope the listeners who are hearing this are not doing the Chicken Little routine, the sky is falling.
Yeah.
The sky is, well, let me put it this way. I personally do not believe that Jesus is coming back tomorrow. I believe that this is an opportunity to radically advance the cause of Christian values, Judeo-Christian values, if we will seize the opportunity and prepare as we should prepare. And Kevin, I know that's what you're about as well.
That's for sure. How are both the right and the left pretty messed up in the economic sense, Dennis?
Well, to some degree, they're Tweedledum and Tweedledee.
Yeah.
The conflict, the challenge is, Kevin, we as a nation have not really been able to have an adult conversation about what's going on. The conservatives, properly so, are concerned about individual rights and freedom, and the liberals or progressive, as should be the case, are concerned about the nature of community. Now, I'm speaking on the broadest possible terms. And what we have to do, because if we're going to look at this from a biblical point of view, biblical liberty is liberty of the individual in the context of caring community. So we're not going to get past the juggernaut, the log jam that we are in, until we begin to have a conversation that transcends where the current conversation is.
Neither side is all that committed to the principles of God's law. So there's no real standard to which they're holding to. And I think both sides are effectively myopic existentialists living for the moment, as John Maynard Keynes would say, in the long run, we're all dead, so who cares what happens in the long run, except for those of us who maintain something of a generational vision. So it seems to me that that nobody in Washington is going to do anything to salvage the situation anytime too soon. Am I too negative?
No, not at all. But again, what we need, and I know that you are, what we are focusing on are looking at the causes and the cures. Mm-hmm. And from my point of view, and I think you and I would be in complete agreement here, what we have lost in postmodernity is the concept of ultimate values or transcendence. Yeah. When you no longer hold that it is possible that there are transcendent laws or principles that go beyond human reason, so to speak, mm-hmm. that are woven into the nature of creation itself on both a social and a physical level, then you are going to go into the kind of a slide that we've gone into. We will get a good lesson here in the next 20 or 30 years that transcendent principles exist, whether you agree with them or not. There are laws like gravity, so to speak, in the social economic dimension, mm-hmm. and that is what this big crisis is going to re-educate the whole world now that the world is technologically flat, so to speak. The whole world is going to get a massive lesson in the transcendent principles of the Creator.
Yeah, and just like people jumping off of buildings, eventually you're going to go boom, you're going to go splat, and you're going to figure out that gravity does exist, and the same thing happens in the economic sense. Well, let's think about what we as Christians can do. You know, you talk about phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 in your book, and phase 1 is the economic stagnation, denial, and totally insufficient remedies, period. Is that where we are right now?
Yes, and I believe we will be in phase 1 through the 2016 elections. Mm-hmm. I think most of us that are dealing with the macroeconomic side of all this are believing that the trigger points are going to be somewhere after 2016 in the next several years following that. And I think we're also going to see, even in the midway elections here next year here in the U.S., excuse me, that we're totally stalemated as a nation. We can't move. Congress can't move. We can't seem to find any way out of the crises. And the reason for that is very simple, is we're not looking at it honestly, and the system can't look at it honestly without having to admit that it is, basically run the ship into the iceberg.
Dennis, as you look back over the last 25 years of presidential administrations, Reagan, H.W., George Bush, Clinton, and now Barack Obama, was there anybody who produced anything, economically speaking, for this nation that was anything but insufficient remedies for the trouble that we're in right now?
No.
Okay.
I appreciated the values mm-hmm. that President Reagan tried to instill.
Yes.
And, that was a light of hope. Mm-hmm. And strangely enough, even Clinton, in some of his economic prudence, he had a lapse of consciousness, I guess.
Yeah. Or he had the Republican opposition. He had the Republican opposition against him, which made it very difficult for him to pass budgets.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And of course, he and Gingrich, got together and made some things happen. But in the big question that you asked, mm-hmm. no one. We've been basically on the same path, and the difference has been the amount of restraint vis-a-vis leverage. That means how much the banking and the financial system and the civil government was trying to leverage a degree of greed and possibilities of social care that there's no way we could fund. Hmm. And, because one of the biblical principles, as a matter of fact, the first biblical principle that Adam and Eve, was the principle of limits. You cannot touch the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And limits, the whole concept of limits, has been largely destroyed in our culture in the last 30 years, morally, ethically, and economically. And when you destroy limits in an economic system, you end up leveraging the currency and leveraging the fiscal spending out to points which are unserviceable. And that is basically where we are.
As we look at the previous recessions of 2001 and 2008, it seems like each successive recession is worse than the previous one, and each successive recovery is nowhere near as good as the previous recovery went, which means a couple of things to me, and maybe you can correct me on this. Number one, it seems like each successive recovery encourages people to relax and think that somehow everything's going to work itself out. They can get back into their consumer spending sprees. They can raise their debt to equity ratios back to where it was before. And yet, on the other side, it seems to me that each successive recession could be a shot again across the bow and a warning, a harbinger warning, so to speak, to God's people who will sit up and pay attention to what's going on.
Yeah, I agree with all that. But, Kevin, as we look at biblical history, and to those of us that have been apprised and aware of this looming crisis, and many of us have from all the way back to the 1980s, had many, many discussions with various folks over the years about what was coming and the inevitability of it. But as I was writing that book, and I spent 5 years and a lot of time thinking about how to write this book on Destiny of Nations, I was reminded by the Lord of Israel and the fact that they had over 300 years of warnings about the consequences of their disobedience, and their little blips and little bursts of semi-recovery, I think is a testimony to the degree of denial that civilizations accumulate for themselves. And here in the Western world in particular, where we've had a historically unprecedented level of the eradication of poverty, the emergence of middle classes, and the emergence of the super wealthy, which we've never seen anything like that except through a very few nobles who existed in history. But this economic bubble that was driven by Judeo-Christian values, as it walked away from it, again, the disconnect is that we think we've created a system that transcends ethics and morals, so that when people are warned about what's coming, they actually have come to trust in so-called science and the wisdom of the so-called secular experts to the point where they think we're immune from historical laws. I just finished reading a book on the history of fiat money, which is one of the most interesting books I have ever read in my life. And it begins tracing the emergence of fiat currencies back in China in the 8th century. And it is one story after another from that day to this, where when currencies were not backed on almost a one-to-one basis with hard assets, it inevitably blew up. It's one thing after another, and that is where we are right now.
All right, we talked about phase one, the economic stagnation period, which is the phase we've been in for a long time. Now you have phase two, the bridge period. I call it the transitional years. I really appreciate the fact you didn't call it the Great Depression. I like the idea of calling it the bridge years. But what are we talking about?
We're talking about the I want to use an extreme word here, the catastrophic, the traumatic realization by the masses that we have really screwed up on a level which they're going to wonder if it can be fixed. The despair that will come as the government is basically broke, which it is already, but it's not revealed yet. Pensions are going to be cut. Medical care is going to be cut. Police services, all kinds of community services are going to be cut because you're not going to have money to pay for them. And the American lifestyle, or even the Western lifestyle, as we have known it, is going to go into cardiac arrest. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't very wealthy people who will, to some degree stay above the fight. But the large masses of humanity, and of course it'll affect the whole world because we're so interchanged now and intertwined economically. But this bridge period is probably the most dangerous period for sure that we will be going through. And here is where preparation for that, both personally, in family, in church, and local communities, we believe strongly that one of the things we Christians need to be doing is digging in deep to the social fabric of our local communities and getting leverage positions where we will be able to influence people during this time. Because, to use your language, the lifeboats are people.
Yeah. God
is preparing people and organizations to be lifeboats when the ship hits the iceberg. And we're going to need them.
One of our goals has been to revive the family economies because we really think that's basic and biblical, but also what's really important for establishing some survival through the transition years, some level of self-sufficiency. But more importantly, I think local communities will survive. Church communities will survive. Family economies are often the most loyal, the most hardworking. They're willing to die for each other. They have a versatility about them, a division of labor and division of gifts, and et cetera, that can pull together and maybe weather these storms. I really think it's time now to start preparing. Don't you think so?
No question, Kevin. And historically, what always happens when centralized government in any form, and Rome would be Exhibit A, and we could go down through many cultures, subcultures, when centralization is defunded. And that's really what's happening is the state is being defunded because it's unbiblically trying to provide services that it's not called by God to provide, that are supposed to come through the family and the private sector. Inevitably, what happens in history is there is a vacuum of power and local communities become strong once again. And that's exactly what's going to happen here in the U.S. and Europe, is the focus is going to be on local community and local provision, not on centralized power.
One of the points you make in the book is that much of the people are medicated this day. Are people really in a trance? Is that why it's so hard to wake anybody up, so to speak?
Yeah, we are in a cultural delusion. And I don't know how much we would want to get into that on this kind of a radio program, but if you believe in that there are created spiritual beings beyond human beings, as in angels and the darker side of angels or dark angels, there is, in my mind, no question that there are severe demonic princes who rule over the cultures of nations to the degree that those nations have walked away from God. Now, that may sound like hocus pocus to some people, but it's not hocus pocus to those of us that are aware of that level of reality. And the level of deception in the United States in particular, because of our heritage, slavery notwithstanding, which again was a giant blot on the nation. But the original founding there in the Northeast and the dedication of this country to God, the kingdom, and Scripture gave us a platform for a number of years to create the idea that we had a divine providential destiny, which I do believe we did and have had and may still have yet in the future. And that kind of thinking has tended to rub off on those who don't see its connection in any way to obedience to God. And they have a delusion that, well, America could never fail. We're too strong. We're too this. We're too that. And that's a major part of what we're fighting is the residue of the protection of God on this nation. And I think 911, to many of us who've been around for a while, recognize that as the lifting of the shield over this country. And it is going to be a rude awakening, and I think one of the biggest challenges that those of us in the faith-based community are going to see is the despair of people when they recognize that there really is a God and they don't know where to find him or how to find him. And that's going to be an incredible opportunity for us in the faith-based community.
If anything, it seems to me it's this trance people are in is a faith in man, a faith in the system, a faith in Big Brother, a faith in the Federal Reserve System, a faith in government Social Security, just a faith in something that is not God and that will fail them eventually.
Absolutely.
And it's hard to bust into that and say, I'm sorry, but whatever you've come up with over the last 50 years in public schools and socialist education systems is going to fail. That's going to fail.
Well, it's already failing.
Yeah.
The cracks are already in the foundation.
Yeah.
And again, for those of us who have been involved in, that would certainly include you, Kevin, in seriously looking at the foundations of society and culture, the family unit is the basic instrument of God in the building of a nation. Abraham's covenant was told, Abraham was told, in thee shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Mm-hmm. The covenant begins in the social unit of the family. Mm-hmm. And that is why the family unit and marriage in particular and raising children, which is a sign of faith in the future, probably more than anything else, all of that indicates that we are already sliding off the deck of the ship, so to speak.
Yeah. Dennis, what can families do right now? Give us some practical things that the average family listening can do right now to prepare for the transition into the new economy in the years to come.
Well, number one, come out of deception. Mm-hmm. And that's not an easy journey. And believe it or not, that it's not an easy journey to recognize that lifestyle as we have known it is most probably going to change, certainly in the next 10 years, and begin to withdraw your demand for a certain level of lifestyle. Mm-hmm. That's square one.
Yeah. Square
two is recognize that the social culture is a direct reflection of obedience or disobedience, and to make sure that we are shifting into an obedient lifestyle, especially in the realm of stewardship and the way that we care for and take responsibility for the assets that we have, and especially the relationships that we have. In a crisis, the greatest asset we are going to have on the planet, so to speak, is going to be the relationships that have been built with key people inside the family and in the cluster units that the families relate to. Community is going to become an absolutely essential phenomena, and that's a very exciting thing, because that transition will begin to push back the alienation and the separation and the glorification of the individual and the destruction of community values. And that's very exciting. Obviously, get out of debt. Obviously, begin to gain insight based on your skill sets into creating family businesses. Obviously, go on another level of education on what we need to do to come out of this crisis, all those things, and the list could go on and on.
Since 2008, our church has worked diligently to keep people off of unemployment, keep them off the social welfare systems, and I think we have moved so much food and resources into other folks. I can't even count how much we've done over the last 5 to 6 years, and also we're encouraging people right now to get off of Obamacare and use the Christian Medical Sharing Ministries, including our single moms. We don't want these people on the socialist doles over the next 5, 10, 15 years, because I think it will be devastating what will happen, especially as powerful governments begin to work with medical care in such a way that they'll euthanize and probably abort the special needs kids and all the rest.
I believe that all the way. Mm-hmm. And again, what we want to do is bring responsibility back in every way that we can to the local community and the family units.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we need to prepare to care for other people.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be a major issue, whether
Yes.
or not we are going to have an extra bed. You know,
Yes.
in the Depression,
Yes.
that was the way that many, many people got through the Depression, was they went home. Now, the problem that we have today is large numbers of people have no home to go to because of the fragmentation of the family. So one of the things we need to prepare for is to be a caring institution in our communities.
Yes, yes. 80 million retiring baby boomers. The young people are playing golf, and their siblings were aborted. Euthanasia, I think, is on the way. And we, by the way, are going to introduce a nationwide initiative for elderly care within Christian family homes over the next 5 to 10 years of this radio program, if God gives us the time to do it and the resources. So elderly care will be a big, big part of our vision as the years go by. Now, I only have a minute or two left, Dennis. I'd like you to talk just for a moment about where we are headed. The opportunity. I mean, this is not all bad news. We're upbeat. We're optimistic concerning the future.
I believe, Kevin, that this crisis is an opportunity to re-engage the culture on a level of relevance and leadership as priests and kings that has not been offered the church for probably 300 or 400 years. This is once in a multi-century opportunity to reposition the value of Christianity and a Christian lifestyle back into the culture for those who can see it as a witness. And it's going to change the way the church operates. The church has got a lot of shortcomings, but in no area have we erred and failed more than in the Great Commission to disciple nations. We privatized the faith, made it only applying to ourselves when God wanted us to take this faith and the lifestyle out into the culture. And this is going to give us an opportunity to do it. And God, through the power of the Holy Spirit, is going to show himself in incredible ways to those who are preparing and walking down this path.
Amen. Very well said. And I am looking forward to the future with great anticipation, friends. The opportunities are there. And, of course, there will be risk, and we will need faith to address the great challenges that lie before us. But we have a commission that will not stop. Jesus Christ will have a kingdom. Lead, follow, or get out of the way. Here it comes. So get on board, my friends, and get the book from Dennis Peacocke. It's called On the Destiny of Nations, Resolving Our Economic Crisis, available online. Dennis Peacocke's book, On the Destiny of Nations, Resolving Our Economic Crisis. Dennis, thanks again for joining us today.
My pleasure, Kevin. Always look forward to sharing with you.
And I'll be back in just a moment. Stay with us. Folks, one of the passions we have on this radio program is to see a Malachi 4 revival in the hearts of fathers and sons across America. I believe this is the catalyst to the restoration of faith, family, and freedom in the 21st century. And that's why we are sponsoring our Father-Son Retreat in Colorado. And folks, we have selected the most inspiring, visionary speakers we can find for this Father-Son Retreat. And you will enjoy inspiring talks, Father-Son Olympics, hiking, swimming, sports, and most importantly, time away with your son in the Colorado mountains. The event takes place at one of the very best mountain resorts in Colorado, the Crooked Creek Ranch, nestled in a stunning mountain range near Fraser. Please register today at check.org on the web for this once-in-a-lifetime experience for you and your son. That's check.org on the web, chec.org, or call 877-842-2432. That's 877-842-2432 to be a part of the Father-Son Retreat. Folks, if there was ever a time that we should be prepared for what is yet to come, it is right now. And that's why we put on our family economics conferences each year somewhere around the country as part of the Generations with Vision ministry. And friends, the family economics vision is the biblical vision for the family and for economics. We put them together into one conference to prepare our families with the basic foundations for social life and economic life as defined by God himself. We're assuming that what John Maynard Keynes and Karl Marx and the egalitarians and the Marxists and socialists put together for the modern world is insufficient, runs contrary to the principles of God's word on multiple levels. And friends, that's why the family economic social system presented in our family economics conferences and conferences all around the country. The next one is pretty much filled, but there's a few spots open for the Washington conference coming up in October of this year. Again, friends, we're almost to the 1,000 cutoff mark on that conference. If you're interested, familyeconomics.com. Again, sign up at familyeconomics.com. We are planning 4 more conferences for next year. We have thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people that want to be at these conferences. Friends, lots and lots of good vision, but more importantly, nuts and bolts and many, many examples of what families have already done to create the multi-stream incomes and all the other aspects of family economies. You've got to check out one of these conferences. I'm telling you, they're great. They are great, and we're thanking God that he has given us a great vision, and people are doing it all around the country. The Family Economics Vision, something that we recommend on this program. Check it out at familyeconomics.com. This is Kevin Swanson inviting you back again next time as we continue to lay down a vision for the next generation and then the next.